It's a little picture of a microphone if you're having trouble finding it. This is your first time using this platform. You just click it, and then if you see the microphone with a dash through it, a red flash, that means you're muted.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started. So hello and welcome everyone. I'm excited to be here with you all to discuss how to create a culture of accountability in your team. So first I'll tell you a little bit about CW, our Cooperation Works. So Cooperation Works is a national network of cooperative developers doing work in all 50 states and in all co-op sectors. And the network enables our members to easily share resources, expertise, and tools with each other. In addition to facilitating the network, we also hold continuing education and professional development programs open to everyone, like this webinar. And our main professional development program is the Art and Science of Cooperative Development. It's a 3-part intensive training for co-op developers. And finally, we advocate for cooperatives at state and national level. So that covers everything from advocating for funding for cooperative development to advocating for co-op inclusive and co-op friendly policies. So now I'll pass it over to Rebecca to tell you a little bit about Round Sky Solutions.
Great. Thanks, Alex. I'm Rebecca, and I'm the communications wizard at Round Sky Solutions. And Round Sky is a worker-owned cooperative that works with leaders, aspiring leaders, and organizations that value and want to improve their democratic and collaborative processes in their teams and hone in on their leadership potential. And we do that through courses, coaching, and team or company-based trainings grounded in our collaborative operating system and processes, which we call CoLab. And you'll hear about that system throughout this webinar. That's what our tips are based on mainly. And I will pass it back to you, Alex. Welcome, everyone.
Great. All right, so now I want to give us some space to know who's on the call today. So you can please use the chat box, which you'll find in the toolbar, a little speaking bubble image, and you can use that to click to introduce yourself to all attendees. So let us know your name, what city or place you're calling from today, and what brought you to into this webinar, if you're willing to share. And I'll read out a few of these as we go. We've got some shy folks so far. All right, so we have Hatshepsut. I hope I did not say that too incorrectly. And he's the operations director for the Black Alliance for Just Immigration.
Yes, that's me.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, that's okay.
Sorry about that.
Right.
And we have Christy from the Northwest Cooperative Development Center. Got Stuart Reed from the Food Co-op Initiative. Lydia from Cooperative Development Institute, Kate Schachter from Union Cab in Madison, Wisconsin. Ooh, wow, now we're getting a lot. The shyness broke through. So I'll just read a couple of more. And if you want to get a better idea from where everyone's coming from, feel free to scroll through the chat box. We've got Sean from Briarwood Co-op in Ottawa, Ontario. Welcome. We've got Karen Haskins from the Working World in New York. We've got Eric Tolson from Mexico City. Awesome, welcome. And he's a co-op developer working in Vientos.coop platform. Awesome. So we've got people coming from all over the country, from other countries. Welcome to everyone. Thanks for being on this webinar. Just to let everyone know, it will be recorded, so I'll be sending that out afterward. And again, read through the chat box if you want to find out more about where people are coming from. And thanks to everyone for sharing. All right. So I'm going to introduce myself now. I'm Alex Stone. I'm the Executive Director of Cooperation Works, and I've been with CW for almost 2 years. I'm based out of Oakland, and I've been in the Bay Area for about 12 years. Most of those years have been spent either living in or working with co-ops in some capacity. So of course, when Rebecca and I started discussing which topic might work best for the co-op community for a webinar, accountability immediately rose to the top of my list. In my time with co-ops, I've seen a lot of really dedicated people, a lot of really effective people, and also a lot of confusion about where accountability lies and how to create it consistently and fairly for a team. So I've seen cooperative projects turn from democratic to duocracies, where those who do decide. And while that can be sometimes an effective way to get things done, it often leaves some people completely disempowered, and it leaves others burned out and frustrated, which is not exactly cooperative. And judging by the registration numbers for this webinar, which is beyond capacity, I think there's a fair number of people and teams out there struggling to create this culture of accountability. It really seems to have struck a chord. So I'm happy we've been able to pair up with Brown Sky Solutions to bring you this webinar. And now I'll let Rebecca introduce herself.
Great. Thanks, Alex. Yeah, it's such a rich topic. And welcome, everyone. Thanks for introducing hello in the chat box to each other. And so I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I'm Rebecca, like I said earlier, the communications wizard here at Round Sky. And I've been working with these for a little bit over a year. And what brought me to this is the importance of process and structure to get us where we want to be. That has always really spoken to me. And I also wanted to enter more fully into the worker co-op movement to gain a better understanding of what economic justice looks like for me. And as I come from a fragmented class background, if that's confusing to you, feel free to reach out to me after. And I currently live in New Orleans for a little over 4 years. I'm originally from California. And outside of Round Sky, I do anti-racist organizing with a collective, try to make time for dancing, and visit my loved ones in California. And I'm really excited to be a part of this conversation today because accountability has come up in so many contexts of my life. And when it's not working, it has been really uncomfortable to figure out how to move forward with some of the teams that I've been a part of. So with that, today's webinar will be presented by Cecile, and I'll let her introduce herself and tell you all a little bit about what brought this topic up for her for creating a culture of accountability.
Yeah, thanks everyone. I'm delighted to be on the call with you all. And I'm Cecile, one of the co-founders of Round Sky Solutions. And I live near Montpelier, Vermont. I've been a social entrepreneur for 30 years and have experienced a lot of challenges with accountability, definitely striking a chord that came out of and contributed to painful working conditions, essentially. So I got really motivated at some point by the waste of time, energy, and creativity that poor accountability represents. I was inspired to take up a deep dive into organizational and individual development in search of an answer. And in particular, I was curious about what power is and developed some theories about power to map or explain the dynamics I commonly saw in organizations. I synthesized this research I'd been doing with my challenging career experiences, and from that research, I created a map of what organizations are already talking about and a set of processes called CoLab that reliably deliver healthy forms of power in action, including much more fun, engaging, productive experiences with accountability. I published Collaboration That Works, a ruthlessly practical handbook for a generative world, as a training manual that summarizes this research and introduces CoLab for all kinds of organizations. So I'm delighted to be here with you, exploring the ways of actively creating a culture of accountability in our work with each other. And today we're going to start by looking at why accountability is so important, including looking at symptoms, causes, followed by exploring some of the myths around accountability that really prevent us from obtaining an effective culture of accountability. And then we'll introduce you to 4 tips for creating a culture of accountability in your teams. And we'll wrap up with some next steps for you that you can consider for yourself and a Q&A.
Great. Thanks, Cecile. And now moving to the logistics about this webinar. If you have any questions, you can type them in the chat box, just like you introduced yourself. And we'll take clarifying questions as needed throughout the webinar. You can send them to me. My name here is Round Sky, or directly to Alex Stone. And we'll leave time for questions and answers at the end, like Cecile said. But if you're having tech issues, definitely use the chat box and let us know. We'll do our best to help you with that. And this webinar will be recorded and shared with you along with all the resources and a follow-up email. So this week sometime. And I'll stop there, but before we launch into the content of the webinar, I wanted to invite you all to tell us a little bit more about what brought you here. In particular, how have you experienced accountability or a lack thereof in your life? Like what's coming up for you? And while you think of that and type it in, I'll just share an example from my own experience. Is that in the past, when I've experienced a lack of accountability, I personally tend to take on every job. I just take it all on, which leads to overworking myself and a little bit of resentment and often overwhelm, which you've probably experienced in your teams. It's not pleasant to be on either side of that. And it's also pretty damaging. So that's an example. And I'll let Alex kind of show us the rest as they come in.
Well, we're still waiting on folks to submit. So we'll give it a minute for folks to type in. And I guess while people are still writing in their response, oh, we actually just got some. So from Eric, we have our perception of accountability is tainted with hierarchies. And in horizontal settings, we can't hold each other accountable because we don't know how to do it anti-oppressively.
Yeah, totally.
Thanks for sharing. We have a yes this to that and a +1 to what Eric said. So you
Nice.
hit on something that resonates there, Eric. See if anybody else has anything to add on to that. So from Gail, we have, it is getting bumped up. A quote I heard from someone at an employee-owned business sums it up well. When everyone's accountable, no one is accountable.
Nice.
We have, oops, keeps getting bumped down. I came from a corporate environment and they are notorious for not being accountable on so many levels. There was no ownership for projects, so no one was accountable if a project didn't get done. From Tracy, we experience a lack of accountability because many of our members are student volunteers and their work with us falls low in their priorities. I have experienced that as well. From Movement NetLab, we have traditional forms of oppression intersect with organizational hierarchies, which makes it difficult to hold people accountable. Seems to sort of echo what Eric put forward. And then from Simon, I believe, we have accountable to what? To each other, to ideas or values, to the people in the room, to people outside the room who we impact. It's a question of who are we even accountable to. It's a good place to start. And then we have Marilyn adding that even with hierarchy, accountability can be hard. From NASCO, we have not having time or capacity to follow up. I could ask if someone has completed an assigned task, but if they say no, they may not be able to dig further into that. And then there was a question of how accountability can be partnered with empowerment. So we have a few more coming in, and I can keep reading them, but Cecile, do you want me to read a couple more, or are we ready to keep diving in?
Yeah, let's dig in. And thank you all so much for those examples. I resonated with all of them. So many of us really have experienced frustrating or unworkable accountability. And, you know, as folks have said, it doesn't show up in just one kind of environment. It's kind of across the board, whether you're horizontal or hierarchical or volunteer-based employed. It's just a challenging thing. And so to quote some examples from our wider culture, there's a recent study from the Workplace Accountability group that recently revealed that 82%, that's huge, of respondents have no ability to hold others accountable, but 91% of people rank accountability as one of the top development needs they'd like to see at their organization. Ding, 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 ding. Yeah. It's really hard. Another example, recent Inc. magazine article about a study on teams at Google listed psychological safety and dependability as the top first and second dynamics that characterize productive teams. So just to name a few top examples of common challenges that I've encountered with the organizations we've worked with and in my own experience. First, I would say is missed opportunities, really. Embarrassing or expensive mistakes can be common. I trained a catering business that would frequently face having forgotten items upon arrival at their delivery site. And of course, this cost the business money and credibility. Invisibility. People often don't feel appreciated for their work. And at the same time, people who actively try to hide from get away with doing as little as they possibly can. One nonprofit that we worked with was surprised, really the larger body of the nonprofit was surprised to find that a key worker in the organization was really doing a lot of work that only one or two other people really had a clue about. And discovering this not only enabled the team to more equitably redistribute work, but also helped the individual in question feel seen and appreciated. Another challenge, compromised follow-through, even from well-intentioned people committing to a project and then not following through. An example of this, a college's strategic planning team was frustrated by the forgetfulness of the individual who said they would conduct some key research and didn't, simply because they'd forgotten. They'd agreed to get it done. Burnout and resentment, that was mentioned earlier. Some people working harder and getting more done than others, including being given more work because they are capable. In other words, their ability to perform becomes a detriment to them. And you can see the quote there on the screen regarding how that plays out. So another key symptom is an inability to increase performance and achieve desired or needed results. One manufacturing organization we trained had trouble increasing sales according to plan because the individuals accountable felt unable to put the time into it. They had other priorities that conflicted. So accountability can falter even when expectations are clear due to a lack of clarity on how to prioritize our time. Another one, high turnover and or feeling trapped. When there's no good place for people to raise their tensions about accountability and get them processed reliably, people can feel trapped in bad working conditions. And an example, an online education company faced unusually high turnover because there was no clear mechanism for addressing accountability issues with the owners. And if people couldn't leave because of personal financial issues, they felt trapped, leading to disengagement. And that sense of entrapment can happen whether you're in a hierarchical or horizontal organization. So at this point, I want to take just a few minutes to go over some of the common causes of lack of accountability to flesh out this territory and really prepare us for thinking a little more about the concrete solutions that we'll present in our tips. So, common causes, unclear expectations. One of the clients we've trained is a Russian bank, and their strategy team complained of the bickering and infighting that regularly occurred because their expectations about who was doing what by when were not aligned. Teammates really didn't know what was their work and what was not, and getting that clear allowed much more generative conversations to happen. Another cause, lack of visibility into what teammates are working on. When we can't see what someone else is up to, it's much easier to assume that they aren't getting much done, even if they are. So yeah, an example, when a team of technicians at a radio station realized that they didn't really know what projects everyone was up to, they were able to do an exercise to surface all the projects and align them strategically. Another cause, expectations that are generated from the top down only. When orders about what one is supposed to do only come from the top, accountability suffers. And here's a real life example and a quote from a business owner that we trained. And I'll read these quotes out for the benefits of those who are on audio only. In 11 years as a business owner, I had not found the kind of help I needed to work towards this objective. Some of my primary objectives as a business owner were to share power and avoid abuse of power, and I feel that both of these, time and again, causing a great deal of suffering for myself and to others and to the capacity of the business to serve us all. So even when we have the best intentions, this can be really challenging. When one doesn't know how to generate expectations from the input of the whole team, the ability to be accountable and engaged decreases. Another common cause, too many projects being worked on at the same time. I think many of us on this call might be painfully familiar with a constant state of having too much to do and all of it being important. When one lives in this kind of situation, being able to deliver on one's commitments, even if one knows what they are and intends to do so, becomes compromised along with our health. Another cause is that information needed for our work is not available or requires extra effort to get. Imagine a landscaping company trying to plant a big tree with a huge root ball and accidentally hitting the gas line, causing an explosion, injuries to workers, property of the homeowner. If only the company had been more clear on who was accountable for calling to get the lines marked, this would have been avoided in the first place. Another cause, people being assigned to roles they are not qualified for or a good fit. When people are promoted for political reasons, not their skills and capacities, or when people have to pick up roles due to constrained financial conditions, one can count on accountability issues. For example, in one small startup where there were only 3 people on staff, the marketing role was given to someone with little marketing experience and a deeply seated distaste for marketing. You can guess what the result was. Yeah, lackluster sales. Another cause, no clear deadline or goals or priorities, or even consequences for not meeting them. When there's a sense that it doesn't matter when one gets to a project or that there are no consequences to not doing so for either oneself or one's team or one's organization, getting stuff done can fall prey to procrastination. So lack of super clear priorities works in the same manner and allows people to focus on the work they're interested in versus the work that the organization really needs them to get done now. Another cause is lack of performance reviews or feedback. Performance reviews and regular opportunities for feedback, both positive and negative, are critical to accountability, along with processes for the personal development requests that come out of those conversations. One team found itself held hostage by an individual who consistently underdelivered due to personal development issues, and without the performance reviews and concrete, safe opportunities for feedback, they were stuck, essentially. Accountability is a huge issue in most teams, and it's interesting to see what people commonly think will fix these issues. So let's talk for a few minutes about the top myths. And the key is that, before we get into the tips, I want to explore these because they can really get in the way of our ability to have effective accountability if we think these things will solve it, but really they don't on their own. So first myth is that it mostly has to do with having the right people on a team. This first myth reflects the bias that accountability mostly has to do with individual performance. And while this is partially true, it fails to recognize the huge role that systems and processes play in enabling accountability. The problem with relying on individual performance is that most people are not particularly adept at balancing multiple competing priorities under pressure without getting overwhelmed and underproducing as a result. And frankly, these are our new conditions. Anyone trying to do good work in the world is going to be living with these. So accountability systems, which we'll talk about in the tips, are critical to creating a foundation for accountability that supports people in delivering on their commitments. Another myth, if we just had more money, yep, that could help a lot of things, but it's only partially true. So if we had more money, maybe we could solve them. Again, it's partially true, but misses the point. With more money, a team could theoretically hire someone to perhaps fill in the gaps on the team, but even with firing underproducers, if you want to do that, a team still has to be able to be accountable to each other and stay aligned and productive. Simply adding a new person into that mix will only add further confusion. So starting by aligning your accountability systems can save you time and money even in the short run. And the third myth, we don't really have the power to hold others accountable unless we're the manager. And this one was common enough to show up in the research that we quoted earlier. That power to hold others accountable, if we're not a manager, it's still needed. And it's true that managers theoretically have more power than others on a team, but frankly, most managers really don't know how to hold others accountable and struggle with figuring this out for themselves. So a set of practices that enable collaborative accountability can be key for both team leads and all team members simultaneously. And today I'm going to show you 4 tips out of dozens that we've researched and synthesized into the collaborative operating system called CoLab that we teach. These are the top 4 that we recommend getting started with and hope you give them a try. Key is implementing this kind of stuff in organizations can be a tricky affair, so we recommend you consider further training and support during this transformation. So, on to tip number 1, role clarity. This first tip is so important. I wanted to share with you how to do a little bit about it today as well, but it really is about clarifying expectations. When we know what is expected of us, it's far easier to be accountable to those expectations. So let's take a moment to talk about what roles are and how to make them clear. Roles are a specific area of work defined by concrete accountabilities. And you can see a couple examples up on the screen for you to look over. And those are the titles and then also some of their key accountabilities. The main kind of meat behind a role is in the accountabilities. And there are several keys to making roles work well. So first one is to develop roles with your team. And they are best developed and agreed to by the whole team. This way, everyone knows what everyone else is accountable for and has a chance to buy in, object, change things, make it work. Number 2, roles equal autonomy. This is sometimes an adjustment for teams, but basically when you're creating a role, that essentially confers the autonomy and the accountability for delivering on the work. And the second piece about having these roles confer autonomy to deliver on the work is that you have some of the other aspects of a strong accountability system in place, which we're about to talk about, namely that projects, the work that you're doing fall within the roles that you have. And the third is to have all those projects nest under essentially specific roles. So here's a suggestion for you in terms of a next action. After the call, we suggest you write down all of the roles you're already doing and take them to your team and get them agreed to by your team. We'll also be sending out a free resource for role generation in the follow-up email. And you can do that first by listing all your work projects and tasks. And this leads us into the second tip we want to share with you today, which is about the ops reports. So if we have clear roles into which all our projects fall, with projects being a body of work that has a defined end, then reporting on these projects on a regular basis to the whole team produces an increase in productivity because, frankly, most people prefer to show up being able to report having accomplished what they said they would. Another thing that Ops Reports does is it provides us with visibility. It's another one of the causes of lack of accountability. So when you get visibility, we get to appreciate good work done, ask questions, raise tensions about the work that's not done. Another thing that it helps us do is align our priorities. It really allows us to rank order our projects in alignment with our current strategic priorities and share that with the team so we can regularly stay focused on what's important to the team. So here's your next action for this tip. We recommend using our Ops Tracker resource that we'll send out to you in the follow-up email and get your team reporting on their top projects. So tip number 3, the task tracking system. This third tip I want to share with you is the importance of individual task tracking. In our current day and age, it's impossible to keep track of all the details of a complex and fast-paced work agenda without an external memory system for keeping track of it all. So set your team expectations for each individual to have a task tracking system. And I highly recommend that this system be transparent to everyone on the team and visible in real time, so you can use it during your ops reports as a visual for all your projects. So one of the benefits of a team-based virtual or offline task tracking system is that it's easier to get all team members on board and to monitor their progress. Mistakes or missed tasks can be much more easily spotted and accounted for. And this kind of transparency works for most people to significantly increase their accountability, since it virtually eliminates the response, oops, I forgot about that task. So your next action for this tip is to get yourself and your team using a transparent project and task tracking system. And there's a lot that goes into that, of course, but in essence, it's a very, very powerful way of getting better accountability. And tip number 4, our role to soul fit. So once you have your roles clear on a team and are using ops reports and task tracking, if you want to achieve the highest level of productivity and accountability, getting people into those roles that are the best fit in terms of capacity, skills, and personality is highly effective. The trouble kind of with roles filled by people who either can't do the work or don't like to do that work is that you will always be swimming upstream. It's much more tempting to fall into procrastination when the work you have laid out in front of you is difficult, or you lack the training to do it well, or it makes you inherently uncomfortable. So finding the right people for the roles is critical to sustaining accountability. And the place to begin with this is to get all of your work, expectations, your roles, and accountabilities clear, and to know which talents are needed for which roles. Then, with a simple analysis of every individual in an organization, pairing people with the roles that are a good fit for them is achievable. So your next action on this tip is to start holding elections for new roles and for rearranging the roles in your team to make a good fit. And you'll get a good sense of who is excited about what through an effective and rapid election process. So let's talk a little bit about benefits. Getting to an effective culture of accountability can be challenging, but it's well worth the effort. Imagine what it might be like for you to have an organization full of inspiring leaders with tools that enable you to hack your work into flows and effective outcomes. Well, for one thing, improving your accountability will save you time and energy and money and open up space for everyone on the team to be more of their full selves, which simply feels better and frankly gets better results. So I want to give you a sense of what you can look forward to, and I'm going to read off these quotes again for the benefit of those who are on audio only. So, working together with flow and satisfaction. I now feel invigorated and excited to work with my business partners, and our work contributes to a meaningful practice of providing service to others while also caring for ourselves. Without this new framework and tools, I would not be in this position. And Woodbelly Pizza is a worker cooperative. So working in collaboration with others can be profoundly frustrating. Otherwise, we wouldn't have so many of us on the call. And that frustration is really just a drain on both organization and individual. Getting to flow and satisfaction produces a host of benefits, including longevity. In other words, people stick around to contribute to an organization's success. Next benefit is mutual support and accountability. Collab proved to be the exact prescription necessary to aid us in our problems of inefficiency, lack of accountability, unclear roles, and management structure. The system has organic roots that speak to the basics of human organization while simultaneously embracing technologies that allow us to prioritize and systematize our daily lives. I found these techniques to be very straightforward and succinct while allowing for necessary flexibility. So yeah, one of the biggest challenges of collaborative work environments where we are explicitly sharing power is accountability on both how we support each other in getting our work done and how we hold each other accountable in the process. Another benefit is a real distribution of power and voice. And this one is huge. If you really want to get accountability and feel some meaningful engagement from your team, try giving them real power. And here's a testimonial from a manager in a 70-person radio station that we just trained. I just wanted to say that adopting the tools that you trained us with has really changed how my team operates. I know others here can say the same, but specifically for me and my team, it has been invaluable. These tools give everyone on my team a mechanism to air any issue, tension, question, frustration, or idea. And the open voting ensures that the most important topics get the most time. It also helps my team hold me, the director, accountable. I can't simply ignore issues or questions, even if I wanted to, and I don't, because they keep adding it to the agenda and keep voting it up for discussion. Another benefit, not getting stuck on issues. With your guidance, you turned what could have been at best a jumbled waste of time, or perhaps at worst, a clash of perspectives, into a constructive reorientation of the focus of our group. In my mind, that was a turning point for the productivity of our team and the success of our work. So the feeling of being stuck in one's work with others is corrosive, especially if it's a consistent feature of your work environment. Being able to move forward on the difficult issues is like opening the windows in a steel room and letting some air and light in. And for me, the best part about all of this is that I and others who are using it are able to use these skills over and over again in all kinds of different contexts. It's kind of like feeling like you've cracked the collaboration code and have superpowers for enabling people to get along and do better work together. So to summarize these tips, first being role clarity, second being your ops reports, the third being the task tracking system, and the fourth being role to soul fit. By now, I hope you can see how easy it is to build a culture of accountability when you know what goes into it and how. In this webinar, we've shared some tips on what's needed for an effective culture of accountability. And now I'd like to tell you about an opportunity to learn how to do this through our online course, our Level 1 Collaborative Leadership Certification Program, which is designed to help you integrate these kinds of tools and embody participatory democratic leadership. So this is an intensive remote learning experience. We've really geared it to work with clients around the world. And you'll learn about how to use our system, CoLab, that taps into the brilliance of your own leadership to start implementing a culture of accountability in your teams. This course builds your skills and increases your confidence in your ability to facilitate your team's growth, vision, and conflict resolution. And it provides you with the necessary skills and practices to communicate effectively within your team on all kinds of challenges, including but not limited to accountability. So I'm going to pass it to Rebecca now, who will share a little bit more about how the course works.
Great. Thanks, Cecile. And those, for everyone on the call, you will get this PowerPoint sent out to you with the recording. So if you missed some of that, you'll have that to review. And I am going to go into a little bit more detail about our program so that you can understand some of the tools that it offers and then decide if it's for you or not, right? And then after that, we'll have some time for questions, Q&A session, questions and answers. So I'll just spend the next few minutes going over that and we'll get into it. So in the Collaborative Leadership Certification Program, CLCP, we have 5 modules, and the first one is grounding in the why and what of collaborative leadership, where you'll learn effective processes for knowing what you and your team need in any situation and how to get there. And this is often the key to that culture of accountability that you're seeking. So this includes tools and skills for facilitating productive and inclusive meetings that have built-in accountability mechanisms for shared teams. And you'll learn how to leverage shared power in your team for social change to get more aligned energy and engagement from all team members, which is essentially means more accountability, right? Engagement. And we spend a whole section of the course on talking about accountability. So we'll be diving into your own accountability system for your team and yourself, and how to put it to use right away in your likely busy life. And in this module, you'll learn how to utilize openness and transparency in your team and integrate that project, whether you have one already, to upgrade it or to create one that works for you. And then you'll set up a collective task tracking system. I know someone asked in the comment box earlier about what kind of systems are out there, so that this is a great place to kind of explore that and get some challenging encouragement from the instructors. And then the next module is about skilled and inclusive facilitation. So through dialogue, practice, and feedback, you'll build your facilitation skills, including tools to manage difficult people or difficult moments with people, to work with the power of conflict, because that's inevitable in the teams that we have where we care about our work, and communicating with clarity. And you'll understand these tools to guide you as you integrate the multiple perspectives in your team, as a lot of us are in cooperatives or in non-hierarchical teams, and build up your team strength together. So that is key, is that strong facilitation. And then we spend a lot of time just practicing and refining our skills together. So you have time to implement what you've learned and also bring in what you've learned in the past, what you've learned in the program and in the past, if that makes sense. And you'll be set up with a plan to keep yourself accountable to integrate and embody these new skills. So I want to tell you, I'm currently going through the program, so I'm kind of in this special place where I can talk about it as I'm going through. So I'll just share some of that with you. And you can feel free to ask me questions about the program as well after this. So to start, through piecing together so much of what I've learned about healthy, powerful leadership in the past and through this program's projects, such as somatic development and facilitation of the actual sessions, I've felt and seen real and sustained progress in my own personal development, even outside of work. And I've also been practicing with collective decision-making tools with the collectives here that I'm a part of in New Orleans and in Round Sky. And these tools are so important to understanding the nuances of how to facilitate collective decision-making, or at least do it better, right? Maybe not perfect it, but do it better. And then that leads me to being able to facilitate productive shared meetings with shared leadership, where there's lots of strong leaders. So both the tools, the practice, the talking through my own struggles in my life throughout the course, and tracking my personal development, it's helped me to hone in on and improve my ability to facilitate my teams through to clear outcomes, and to be clear when when there is an outcome, right? And lastly, throughout the whole program, we've come back to and even built our own culture of accountability for ourselves as individuals, and also how to integrate that into our teams. So it's been highly effective to have this program to update my current task tracking system, which on some days is not very exciting to me, and to also really delve into what it takes. So you'll use these skills over and over again in all kinds of contexts, and you can see that in our writing and our blog. And then you also get access to lots of other great things, like an intimate cohort of like-minded peers to bounce ideas off of and grow with, and personalized feedback, and access to Collab 101. So if that's something that you're interested in, if you're seeking that personal development growth, please reach out to us for that. And with that, I will open it up for Q&A. So if you have some questions, type them in the chat box and we will get started. And there was one earlier that we can start with from Ashley Ortiz about, let's see if I can scroll back to it. A challenge I've seen is teams trying to agree on a shared system of keeping track of who's doing what and when. It'd be nice to know of systems people like and use. And some folks responded about Asana and Trello, but Cecile, do you have anything you'd like to offer on that?
Yeah, I would second those offers of Asana, Trello, Podio, but those are simply the platforms that you're going to enter your data into. To me, the really interesting question is, how does the team make use of that information, both on a daily basis, so like in the flow of our work, and then in our team meetings? And that, to me, one of the benefits that I found of Colab is it provides you with a clear module for how to do this reporting and aligning. And you can, once the team has learned that, you can evolve it over time. You can change it and kind of morph it, but you never lose the foundation that you've got for being accountable to each other. And the benefit of that is like a plug and play system, and you don't have to spend the years, months, however long it takes till you can agree as a team as to how you're going to do it. You can say, here, let's start with this, and we'll evolve that over time. And that can save you a lot of frustration, a lot of frustrating, conversations and time wasted. So I would, besides whatever platforms you might be considering, the process behind that and how you communicate about your accountability is perhaps the most critical in my mind.
So far, we're not getting any. One more question just came through. All right, a couple more questions just came through. Let's scroll up. We got a tricky one here. Can you role play for us the moment in the meeting when you're doing ops updates and when a team member says, I haven't made any progress on this project? What is the best way for other team members to respond?
I love it. Okay, I'll give you a range of answers. But first, I want to contextualize, within Colab, there are essentially two steps to the feedback that happens after you get, I haven't done anything about that, right? The first is that when a person's done reporting, everyone has a chance to give questions and comments, and these are meant to be brief. And then the second, perhaps most important, is that if there is a conversation to be had about it, if there's something more that needs to happen, it goes on the agenda for discussion. So we don't take it up during ops reports. We get into the meat of it in that agenda item, and there's a lot of good reasons for that, but just so you know, that conversation is held till after ops reports. And it's pretty important in terms of having effective collaborative meetings. So back to your question of role-playing, the response to someone not getting their project done, let me give you a few just sort of questions and comments that might come up. The first one that I like to ask is, what's the next concrete step for you with this project? Sometimes when projects aren't happening, it's because it's confusing, and because it's confusing and a little unclear to us, we sort of deprioritize it. Right? There's some thinking work that essentially has to go into enacting our projects, and that's often implicit to us. We're not aware of it, but it's really like, what's the next thing I need to do? And when there's a project that's not moving, often the thinking work hasn't been done. And so asking that simple question, what's your next step? Concrete next step. Can sort of break that logjam. And in our collab meetings, that also goes on the agenda as an output. That person then takes that next action. I'm going to do this. And again, within our meetings, those next actions are emailed out or they go back into that system so that individual gets a reminder. Another potential response is, wow, that doesn't work for me at all. Like, we've got this thing coming up and I'm frustrated, I'm angry, I'm really disappointed. This isn't working for me. Be clear. Own it. This is your experience, but be clear. It's not working. In that kind of a case, I would definitely put it on the agenda for discussion because there's more there that probably needs to be clarified to move this forward. Other possibilities, call a new role election. If that individual isn't delivering on a role that's important for the team, get someone else into that position. And within Colab, that can happen really easily with a role election process. So those are a few ideas. There's also the opportunity to provide input on performance reviews, which I recommend being a very regular thing. So like weekly or monthly at the longest. So yeah, feel free to ask more questions about that. But that's a great question.
Thanks, Cecile. So we have a question that came in from Tracy. When working in collaboration, how do we make sure holding people accountable doesn't fall on one person? How do you foster holding each other accountable?
Yeah, well, the core answer to that is that it becomes accountability is a team process. And it's not just, oh, this is a team process and it's kind of like how we are, but it's literally grounded into our meeting process. So the way that meetings are structured is essentially delivers collaborative accountability across the team. So everyone goes through that ops report. Everyone gets a chance to say how they're doing and how they're, what's been done, what's not been done. Everyone hears that, and everyone on a team gets to respond in terms of how is that working for them? Is it not? Is something else needed? So that literally by having those ops reports as a team process, it takes it out of the hands of one person. Essentially what we're doing is taking, like, the role of manager is the place where most of that sort of accountability has happened in our history, right? So we're taking the role of manager and we're breaking it down into concrete leadership needs and putting those into meeting processes instead of having them have to default to the one manager or the one person who's kind of picking that up on a horizontal team because it's needed. So that's what I recommend doing, is make sure you have an effective team process.
Thanks, Cecile. And people can keep asking questions. We do have one more right now, but please keep asking if you have them. From Molly, we have, what about accountability to those outside the organization?
Nice. So I'm gonna take a guess, and feel free to clarify in the comments there, but I'm gonna take a guess that those outside are our stakeholders. So perhaps the people that we're serving, the people that we're hoping to benefit. And in short, there's several things. One is that we highly recommend having a clear mission statement, which is the work of the organization. And that mission is linked to metrics that are going to help you understand, are you providing the benefit you intend to your people? Not just are you delivering X number of trainings, but how are your people experiencing your work? And that information can be gathered in a lot of different ways, but it's really important that those metrics are regularly gathered and reported on at an organizational level so people can see, are we doing what we say we want to do? Another way to do this is to have some type of essentially focus group with your constituents and ask them directly in a more, say, meeting style or retreat style situation, how has our work been for you? So those are a few ways. You can also then invite them to help brainstorm, well, how could we be doing better? And what are the other communities we need to be thinking about? So it can be really fun and engaging to involve your constituents in that type of a process.
All right. And from Movement Net Lab, we just got a couple more questions. Let me scroll back up. What do you do if folks don't show up to team meetings or processes consistently, and how do you hold them accountable then? Good question.
A very good question. So there's nuances here, which I may not be able to get into, like, how do you deal with volunteers that are only doing 2 hours a month, right? But so setting that question aside, which I can come back to at a later point, the first mechanism I recommend that you use is to have a role of scope member or team member for every team. And that role has specific accountabilities, like preparing for and attending meetings, responding to your email, very basic things like tracking time, whatever the most basic things are that the team assumes everyone should be doing, don't assume. get it in writing, and that when a person is elected into or chosen into a team, they take that on. They understand, this is my job. This is part of my job. This is my core work that I need to do to be a part of this team. So having expectations clear is really important. And in addition, next sort of layer of accountability is that whether or not we're attending meetings actually becomes part of your ops reports. So am I attending meetings? Yes, no. And you can see that you have a record. If they're not there, they can't report on it. So those records of attendance or lack of then can be actually factored into your performance reviews, and those numbers can then also impact pay. So there's a variety of mechanisms that you can engineer to make it be really clear that that's expected, and that essentially you are being compensated for attending as part of a core team activity.
All right, and we have a couple more questions that have come in. What if a few people in your team constantly have not followed through with what they said they would do, or have not taken initiative, but have all the intention and are committed with the work, but maybe experiencing personal challenges such as insecurities for quite some time?
Nice. So one of the components that I recommend is having a clear expectation of personal development as part of your team. And within CoLab, we have some modules for that. Essentially modules for making it a focus, making it clear and explicit. We know what is that individual working on, and they're also then personally reporting within a smaller cohort on their progress with respect to that. Are they just stuck? Are they moving? And if they are stuck, they get support from their small group, small personal development group to keep that moving forward. So that's one level. Another is that I would consider if that individual is in the right role. They may not be. And if you have the option to move them into roles that are a better fit, great. If you don't, then is there training that's needed to support them through whatever challenges they're facing? And, I think it's important that we consider that there may be times to let people go, that it's not the right time for them to be working in an organization or working, again, in those particular roles that perhaps they're making no progress with.
And from Eric, we have the question, they've said, the question about stakeholders made me wonder, how can we incorporate accountability into governance? And that's thinking specifically of co-ops.
Yeah, well, I recommend having the explicit mission, your explicit vision, mission, and values all have concrete metrics by them. And so depending on how you use the word governance, to me, governance is about our shared agreements. And some of our shared agreements at the highest level are our purpose, our vision, mission, and values. And rather than have those just be nice ideas, they're actually specific, concrete. All
right. So no more questions have come in since then. If anyone has any more, feel free to type them in now. And of course, you can always follow up with Cecile after the webinar as well. But if there are any more out there, feel free to send them our way.
Yeah.
And we just had a comment from Kate, who's with Union Cab. That was in regard to the earlier question about folks not showing up to team meetings or our processes consistently. Yeah. And she just put out there that they make clear that there's only room for up to 3 unexcused absences because emergencies happen. And if they meet those 3 unexcused absences, that's cause for being dropped from their team.
Great. That sounds wonderful to have that clear up front. And it sounds like you may then need an opportunity to perhaps test people before they become full members. And so you're not onboarding people that are unable or unwilling to make that commitment.
Great questions, everyone.
Yeah.
We have A couple more that just came in, actually, if we want to hit on those, and I think we have time. How important are consequences? From Marilyn.
Nice. They're huge. I mean, essentially, let's just talk on the positive side. The positive side of having made movement on the projects that are yours and you're reporting on them, the consequence of that is appreciation and that sense of satisfaction that things are moving forward. Downside of that, of course, is lack of appreciation. And it's important that team members provide that for people in the moment, right? When they're saying, hey, I haven't done this. I think a lot of us come from a culture of being unwilling to raise uncomfortable topics and to confront. And having a safe system wherein you can do that is critical, right? Because there's good reasons why we avoid conflict, right? Yeah. So a good system so that you can safely deliver that, wow, that sucked. And then still move on constructively in the relationship is critical. But having that space and then practicing giving that feedback is important. Those are just two examples of consequences. I think each team, depending upon the circumstances, should develop the consequences they need for their particular situation. And I like to encourage people to think about natural consequences, like what is the natural consequence? I'll use an extreme example of missing your grant deadline. Well, you don't get the money. So that's really simple and black and white, but sometimes we get insulated from that. We're so far down or elsewhere in the organization, we don't feel that consequence. So yeah, nice question. Thanks.
And then we had kind of a two-parter come in from Eric. What about different interpretations of accountability in one team? For example, one person has a more hierarchical framework, others more horizontal. And the second part of that is, how do we teach more loving, less punitive forms of accountability?
Yeah, great question. I'll start with that last one first. And by saying that having a clear, transparent process for being accountable to each other, not one manager, is a huge step in the direction of creating that loving, less punitive culture of accountability. And one of the pieces that we're really working on with that ops report is we get to hear the good work that's been done and the not so good work as well, but we offer an explicit time after that for everyone to appreciate their coworker for what they have done. So it's a literal moment in the meeting. It doesn't need to take long, and often doesn't, but it delivers tremendous value and training to people to appreciate, to extend that thank you to your coworker for doing that job. So it does provide training over time for teams to, in general, become more appreciative. Yeah.
No other questions have come in for now. But again, you can feel free to follow up afterward via email. There'll be a recording of this webinar sent out, as well as the slides from the webinar today. So we'll definitely have more opportunity to follow up if later you realize you have a question that you didn't get to ask.
Totally.
Great. Well, here are our emails if folks would like to reach out to us. And like Alex said, just feel free to email us if you have questions or anything you'd like to tell us. And there will be an evaluation survey also coming out too, so we'd love to hear what you think as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and on that survey, you'll be able to not only tell us what you thought of today's webinar and give feedback here, you'll also be able to put in some suggestions for what kind of webinars you want to see in the future. We want to continue offering these, and we'd love to hear about what are the issues you want to dive into on these. So please feel free to share that or fill out that evaluation and make sure we hear where you're coming from.
Great.
Nice. Yeah.
Okay, thanks for joining.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Stay tuned for the next webinar.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. Feel free to open your lines if you'd like and say bye.
can unmute everyone.
I want to make sure it's all okay.
And can't unmute all. Seal,